Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Raza Ghazim. David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, felt that his position of power gave him the right to summarize and project homogeneity onto more than half the Muslim population, i.e. Muslim women. This in turn created a Twitter storm reaction that would have made any man worth his salt apologize for calling Muslim women traditionally submissive. But then again, this is David Cameron, and Prime Ministers of the UK rarely apologize for anything of consequence.
David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, recently caused a furore amongst Muslim women in the UK by describing them as submissive. In a private conversation reported by the mainstream media, the PM discussed a special fund to teach English language to Muslim women, suggesting that their inability to speak the language meant that they could not integrate into the society and were thus more prone to extremism. The anything but submissive Muslim women took to the Twitter to challenge Cameron's view, with stormy tweets showcasing their great contribution and success in the UK. Not least was their fluency in not just the English language, but multiple languages most Muslim women speak. Why David Cameron specifically targeted Muslim women when there are many other women from migrant communities who do not speak fluent English, and indeed Muslim men who are not accomplished in the language, has also raised a heated debate.
If you want to measure and you want to get numbers, you will find most of the Muslim women's bilingual. Yeah, me, I'm talking Arabic and English. I've got so many friends with me who even talks even 4 languages. So I think this is totally wrong thoughts and ideas from the Prime Minister.
Well, I know many Muslim women who have become very successful lawyers and barristers and a few judges out there. So they do have the qualifications, they do speak the language, they have moved forward and they have got professional jobs, and they are very, very high profile jobs.
Just because a woman doesn't have a voice in English doesn't mean she doesn't have a voice at all. And a lot of our mothers and fathers who've come from other countries have faced a lot of difficult situations. They've done things which I don't think we could have done in our generation to get us to a place which is safe and where we can have a good education and a good start in life. And it's quite condescending to suggest that our mothers who've gone through so much don't have a voice. A lot of our mothers are educated, and yes, their English, it may not be their first language, but they've certainly made a life for themselves and have made life for us here. And I think that in itself is enough to demonstrate that they're not submissive.
I'm pleased to welcome Professor Tariq Ramadan to help us analyse the subject we'll be discussing today. Welcome, Professor.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I want to ask you, why do white men in power feel that they can tell Muslim women what they are?
I wouldn't say white men in power. I would say the great power that we have, the big powers in the West, very often in their relationship with the global South or Southern countries or colonized countries. They were very often lecturing the people and telling them what is right and what is wrong. And once again, this is very much a statement coming from, this colonizers' minds, looking down at Muslims and telling them what is right. And once again, it's not new. We had exactly statements, and especially when it comes to colonization, targeting the woman as if by showing that the Muslim majority countries are what they were calling the Islamic culture, meaning the Islamic reference, is very much discriminatory or stigmatizing women. This is something which is a very old feature of the colonizers' minds.
And isn't this basically a white man trying to be a knight in shining armor, actually telling Muslim women and saying to her, look, we're trying to save you from your own barbaric mentality? Why do they feel that they have to do that? Why? Because physical colonization, you could argue to some extent, is over to a large extent. But why is that attitude still continuing?
It's about ideology. Lord Cromer, for example, he was against women voting in the UK, and he was going to Egypt telling the women that they have to remove the headscarf. So in the name of women's rights there, but he was not supporting them here.
So a hypocrisy kind of thing being enacted.
Yes, using this as, in fact, looking at what is the critical factor through which you can target a culture, target a society, and especially in Islam, showing how much Islam is alien to the Western values. By saying this, in fact, we need to civilize you. We need to give you what civilization is all about. And it's going to be your women are submissive, you are discriminating women, and the only way to liberate you from your own narrow understanding of modernity or misunderstanding of modernity is going to go through women. And more than that, there is something which is very strange. You say, it's about, we speak about freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, and it's as if in some Western minds, the fact that women and men in other societies and other cultures are not willing to be free the way the West is free, it's just it's not understandable, it's not explainable, it's irrational, it's not right. So the right way of being developed or being industrialized or in being modern is the way we are modern. You cannot choose another way. It's as if you're not like us, you're against modernity. And say, look, you have Anne coming to a woman who is wearing the headscarf or deciding that she's going to wear the niqab. Even though I don't support this as a Muslim, I'm saying this is not Islam, but I am respecting the woman who goes for it. They say, no, that's not possible. There should be a man behind. There should be a brother, a father who is imposing to this, or a patriarchal system. Not understanding that some women are deciding with their freedom, with their mind, with their autonomy to go for it because they are believers. That's not a way of, that's not understandable and not even acceptable for some Western minds.
Now, how are you going to try to change that mindset where it does potentially become acceptable or become that it shouldn't be considered as a problem?
There are many levels here that we have to consider. First, we really have to challenge this mindset and this ideology and the whole paradigm that is behind this. So this power relationship, patronizing, lecturing, and arrogance. And we have to do this. And especially, this is what I'm saying to European Muslims. Very often even with the UK establishment in France or in the UK or in the United States, I'm considered as dangerous. Why? Because I'm speaking with their words by challenging their arrogance, by saying, how come? We are Western Muslims and we decide for ourselves. We want to pray 5 times a day. We want to fast. We want to dress as we want, and you don't have to tell us the right way of being free. If you are serious about freedom, we are. And if you are serious about freedom, you don't impose onto me the only right way to be free. And this is your arrogance. This is what we have to do, this is also an intellectual liberation. Many Muslims are politically liberated, intellectually colonized. And we have to liberate our minds by being able to tackle these issues.
Could you expand that? What do you mean by politically free and intellectually colonized? Doesn't one follow from the other? Would you not be politically...
No, that's very dangerous, because politically free, for example, you cannot deny the fact that in some of the southern countries, there is no physical colonization. The state is, you are deciding for yourself. And even here, as citizens, you are free, you can decide. So you have political freedom, but it doesn't mean that you have intellectual freedom. And by the way, it's not only the Muslims. Many of our fellow citizens are intellectually colonized by the way media are portraying the issues and the way and economic factors are playing into the whole political landscape. So I would say that what I see with Muslims is that yes, they are free to move, free to think, but when you see the way they are thinking, this is really intellectual colonization, which is the most dangerous one. Because I always say the most dangerous jails are the one from which you don't see the bars. Is that you think you are free, but you think you are thinking exactly the way you are expected to think. And I would say that if you are asking me about how do we deal with somebody who is saying, you're women and we have to free your women, say, look, that's not going to work. And we have to be able. Among the Muslims, we need women to do the job. And that's very important. If I carry on speaking as a man on behalf of women, it's still a man who's speaking. We need women. And we have lots of women now coming and taking the floor, speaking out and being courageous enough. So that's very important, because the best response to Cameron saying this is British.
The touchy storm.
So, yes, exactly. So I think that this is the second thing that we also have to do when it comes to this. It's also to be very clear with the political establishment, is that now they are dealing with fellow citizens and they are dealing with a religion, Islam, which is a British religion. So they have to stop now speaking about Islam as if it's an alien religion. And this is why also now it's very important in our discussion to make it clear that we are not going to accept, and we should not accept, any type of racism and patronizing attitude telling us in which way we have to deal with our own principles and values.
Some interesting points being made. I want to come back on one of those. We appreciate the views you send us through our social media outlets. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, why did the British Prime Minister call Muslim women submissive? Losine from Morocco said, British Prime Minister is not a Muslim, so it is normal for him to criticize Muslims. In addition, Muslim women are attracted to their culture, and they are aware that blind imitation to Western traditions doesn't suit their religion and their principles. These, amongst others, are two main reasons why the Prime Minister called these women traditionally submissive. Politics and racism would also be behind this kind of comment. Amira from Iraq said, he's just an ignorant politician who says things he's asked to say for political gains. And Nadira from UK said, the way he has said this is wrong, but we shouldn't overlook the fact that there are women in Muslim communities who are suppressed, not due to not knowing English, but due to cultural issues. That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your comments featured on the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter.
One of the things that has actually come out very strongly is this idea that perhaps the reaction that happened with all of these Muslim women on Twitter going out and actually challenging David Cameron in that way was in some sense phenomenal. You know, it was, I think, a third-rated kind of thing. But are Muslims a bit too touchy about what David Cameron has said? Is there merit, is what I want to explore a little bit, in what he's saying? If Muslim women are submissive, they do not understand, you know, he links it to the concept of being able to understand language and so on and so forth. So if they can't actually understand the environment, how can they guide their children?
We have to be clear on what the statement implied and is implying in the whole thing, in the whole mindset. And this is good that we have women. Now we also have to come back to ourselves and say, are we doing the right thing when it comes to the whole issue of women within the Muslim community? Because there is something which is clear today with all the statistics that we have in surveys and polls that we have about education. The Muslim women that they are educated are doing much better than men, and they are really playing a very important role. So to promote the state of denial, saying no, we have no problem. Of course we have a very powerful trend of educated women being able to respond to Cameron and say, look, that's wrong. But at the same time, we cannot deny the fact that we have within the first generation of Muslims, many women who were not in touch with the society, not learning the language, and that's very important. If you are a free citizen, you need to know the language of the country. So we are not going to do this because Cameron is saying that that's so important. We are doing this knowing that with all the statistics and what we need, we have to work on this as something which is important, is that to get the knowledge of the country, to know the environment. Why? Because at the end of the day, that's very important when you are a mother and when you deal with the society as a human being first, as an autonomous human being. It's important, and as a mother it's important because you have to know where you are living and how you are going to deal with the environment. And we cannot deny the fact that in too many families, this disconnect between the traditional education of the mother and the contemporary environment, there is a gap, there is a fracture, and if you are not connected, you cannot educate your sons and daughters.
On that point, I saw someone write that actually I'm a pharmacist, my brother's a doctor, my sister's a lawyer, my mother couldn't speak English, and she made sure that we were very well versed in how to function within society. What would you say to someone like that? Because
that's very true, because many of the parents, sometimes they didn't know anything about the environment, but they were very, very strict and very protective with their kids. And that's true. That some were very successful because their parents were protective, and the mother, even if she didn't know or she doesn't know the language and the environment, was very, very much focused on education. But this is not the rule, unfortunately. You cannot just take this example and forget that we have many of our, and especially with young men, with teenagers, men more than girls, are completely lost in this society, and they see, if you go back to the mother, you will see that the mother is protective of a traditional relationship, but not focusing enough on education. She is not equipped with the tools and the instruments, knowing the environment to protect. So she can protect her daughters sometimes by being very protective. You don't go out, you stay at home, you focus, and they are letting the boys much, because this is coming from the cultural dimension. It's not Islamic, it's cultural. And I had to deal with this in many countries in Europe, when you see the boys completely lost, and you come to the mother full of love, but not getting it, not getting the environment. So I think that if we look at the statistics, you will see much more being lost than families being protected. And this is an issue for us.
This being linked to the idea that this could be one of the cogs in that conveyor belt to terrorism is what I think was being objected to the most.
Exactly.
Now, would you not say that this in itself is a problem? Because yes, the societal issues that you're bringing up are valid points, but that link that David Cameron is making in that traditional submissive kind of attributing it to the Muslim woman is problematic.
Yes, of course it's problematic, and it starts with a very deep contradiction, because if you go to Cameron, and we can talk about the French, the American or the British establishment, all the countries say, you know what, everything that has to do with violence and terrorism has to do with socio-economic problems. They would say, of course not, it has to do with Islam. And then now we have somebody telling us, oh, look, we have to educate your women because it has to do with terrorism. So when it suits you, it's socio-economic problem, or the fact that they are not educated. And when you want to use Islam as the main factor, you say, no, it's only religious. We are saying it's both. It's both. There is a problem with interpretations of religion, and we have to tackle the issue. But there are socio-economic problems, and they are not the main reasons why some are being terrorist afterward or violent extremist afterward. Why? Because in fact you have people who are educated. If you look at the statistics, for example, the people who were involved in the state and all this, they were quite educated. They were not coming from socioeconomic. You cannot just identify the reason by going to the mother saying, "Oh, you don't know how to read." That's completely silly. This is very superficial. But in fact, the main point in all this discussion is to see the governments playing with reasons depending on how they are going to deal with the issues. So we can take socioeconomic reasons or religious reasons and changing this, and with no consistency.
And in terms of challenging the narrative that the British government, so in this case David Cameron has put out, but you can probably find parallels in other places, of saying actually what you have said and continue to say about the social engineering of the Muslim community in a way that will fit in with what you want. How do you push back and say, no, that needs to stop? Because surely that's where the Muslim community will say that they want to get to. They don't want to be patronized and lectured to, as you said earlier.
Yeah. I think all the discussion, all what we said today is the answer to the British establishment by saying stop patronizing and stop making Islam and the Muslim families the other and targeting and stigmatizing women as you did in the past, and now you are doing it inside. So it's colonizing minds that we have now within Britain as we had it before with other countries. Now it's very important for us to be able to have an intellectual presence which is challenging the discourse, in fact the narrative, that's essential, because what is deep in the mindset of the British establishment, but everywhere else, by the way, in the States as well as in many European countries, is that this the mindset and the paradigm is problematic. So we need to have this intellectual presence. Now, having this intellectual presence means, as I said, not to be in a state of denial. We have lots of work to do within the community when it comes to education, yes. Now we have to understand that, to keep a family even in the West is a jihad. It's a jihad, it's resisting pressure from outside. And you cannot get the right education if you don't have in the Western countries a father and a mother being educated, understanding the environment, speaking the language, and knowing how you protect your kids, you protect your children. You have to do this. So I would say to be self-critical is not to accept to be patronized. It's a sign of strength when you are ready to look at your own failures within the community, your own shortcomings, and to try to address the issue.
Now, in terms of the reaction, that we mentioned this earlier about the Twitter storm and how they reacted to David Cameron. Do you think that was that was a good way of doing it, and how successful was it?
No, it is successful by the number. The fact that, it was a huge response. Is this going to change the mindset? Is this going to change the British policy and domestic policy? I don't think so. I think it's a long run process. It's a long run process. It's very important to react and say, look, you're not going to talk on our behalf, and women responding. It's good. Now it has to be constructive. It has to be something that we understand on the long run. So I would suggest that beyond the reaction or the immediate reaction, we have a long run action about it, and it means to be able to show that all the statistics are showing that he's wrong, that the women are now achieving good and better, that what we have within the family is now a new type of presence, that he has to stop. We have to stop in Britain thinking that we are always, after 50 years, dealing with a second generation. We are reaching the fourth and the fifth. So who are you talking, the new migrant? But it has nothing to do with your own fellow citizens in this country. And this is it. When you speak about Muslims, second generation young Muslims, always young. They are not mature, so they are always young. You always have to. So there is no autonomy. The words matter. Why are you always talking about young Muslims? Young Muslims, they are 40, they are 30, they are, what's that? So now they are not so young. And then the second generation to be integrated, that's over. And I keep on repeating, the success of integration is to stop talking about integration with your mind, to understand that these are your fellow citizens, and then with this to acknowledge the fact that we are doing better in terms of getting the language, knowing the environment, and working within the society. Having said that, in the positive way, being also quite aware that we have challenges that are very deep within our community as Muslims, as people who are living here, in the way we are translating our principles into the European landscape.
More than being academic, sounds like a call for action. On that note, the Prime Minister has appealed to the lowest common denominator of racism. It is the latest way that racism can be articulated without it being labelled as such. When we look back at this time and sociologically analyse the language, mainstream people will call it racism and say how stupid it was for him to say that. But this is being said today, now, by many people, and we shouldn't be arguing moral relativism in the future or plead ignorance about what the British Prime Minister David Cameron has said today. That's all the time we have today. Thank you, Professor Tariq Ramadan, for joining us, and I thank you all for watching. Until next time, goodbye.